Is the live stream on? Thank you very much. So we'll just go to number 1, which is apologies and substitutions. Is there any apologies today?
No, convener, no apologies.
Thank you very much. We go to number 2 then, declarations of interest. Any colleagues have any declarations of interest? No, no hands. Brilliant. So we go to number 3, which is the minutes. So there's 3.1 is for approval, 3.2 is for noting, and 3.3 is for noting. Is that agreed? Councillor Cheap? Councillor Durno?
Apologies, I had my hand up by mistake. Apologies.
Sorry. Councillor Durno, did you have your hand up by mistake?
It's just a spelling mistake in the Harbour Committee papers on item 3, which is talking about the access for parking. It's put down as Brown's cabin instead of Bowson's cabin. It's just a name that has to be changed on the minutes.
Okay, Andrew, can I get you to sort that out, please?
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so the minutes agreed. We'll move on to item 4, which is information reports. And the first one, Schedule 1, is the Private Sector Housing Grant 2021, 1st of March 21. Any questions on this item? No. Oh, Councillor Proctor.
Yes, convener. Just on the schedule, Schedule 1. It just says that significant and continuing. We're monitoring the effect of the backlog. Just how are we managing? How are we progressing on that? How's that getting on? With the backlog, you know, which is sort of accrued by COVID.
Okay, do we have Mr. Morrow with us today?
Yes, Chair, I'm here. I can pick
Brilliant.
that up as best
Like
I can.
to try and answer Councillor Proctor's question, please.
Yeah, Councillor, there often is a slight overlap between, as you know, between financial years and the private sector housing grant, because it takes a while to carry out the assessment and then put the arrangements for the work to take place, and that very often runs over from one financial year to another. Although obviously this year there's exceptional circumstances in terms of number, because it's been very difficult to carry out the work in occupied homes due to the restrictions. So that obviously caused the backlog, and clearly the client group involved, some of them were very vulnerable and part of the shielding group. So that was one of the reasons that that the work has been delayed. So what the arrangements are in place to try and pick that backlog up as much as possible, whilst at the same time obviously looking at future need. And like everything, as we come into the recovery period after the pandemic, it's about trying to get a balanced approach. It will be some time before we catch up with that backlog, but we hope to achieve it, I think, within the current financial year, albeit there's always a risk, obviously, that some of this year's work will have to span into the next financial year. But we don't think that's an unmanageable situation, and hopefully we'll see the results of that work in the report that comes with the next quarter's figures.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from anybody else? No. Any comments? Councillor Durno?
Yeah, I just think that this report's a bit sad, actually, because I really think we should be looking to see if we can increase the budget for this in the following budgets, because I don't think the money that's available for doing this work is not nearly enough. And we might have a lot of people coming out of COVID recovery with long COVID that might be left with disabilities, etc. So I think maybe in the next funding stream we should really look at increasing this amount. So that's really just my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? No. Okay, we move on to Schedule 2, which is the Private Sector Housing Grant 21-22, Q1 to 30th of June 21. Is that a new hand, Councillor Durno? No.
I'm trying to get my hand down. It doesn't want to go down.
I think there's a new hand from Councillor Proctor, so
Thank you very much, convener. It mentions in Schedule 2 about the cost of the OT assessment. Now, is that borne by us, the council, or by the client? I know when my wife was ill, the OT came around. I never received the bill, so I presume it goes against the council. The reason I ask is in one of my other jobs, I've seen OT assessment bills being sort of raised by local authorities, and I'm sure I'm right in saying that in Angus we don't do that. Could that be confirmed?
I'll ask Mr. Morrow, would that be you?
Yes, Chair. I must admit it's not my particular area of expertise, but I can look into that for you, Councillor. I mean, some of the grant arrangements are a bit complex, but we can certainly look at the split of what's borne by the Health and Social Care Partnership, the occupational therapy service, and what comes out of the grant, and there may be different arrangements depending on different clients. But if you want, what I'll do is I'll find out a bit more about that and contact you after the meeting, if that's okay.
That's great. I mean, one of the things you should be aware of, for the council to be aware of, wearing my veterans champions hat, that service organisations are there to actually provide some of the money that may be encountered for OT reports. So, you might save a few bob.
Yeah, I'm sure you're quite right, and I'm sure obviously we want to make the best use of the resources that we have available. So there might be a mixture depending on the particular circumstances. But I think we can look into that and try and find out the information and take some action as necessary.
Okay, thank you. I think Councillor Braze is next.
Yes, thanks, convener. I wondered if you could maybe give us an indication of the range of the level of grant that applies to individual properties, i.e. what's the sort of lowest figure we might pay out and what's the highest figure?
Okay, Mr. Morrow, I think that's you again.
Just ballpark.
I think I might ask my colleague Lee Tom to come in here because it's more her particular area, if that's okay.
On you go, Lee.
No problem, John. You answered everything perfectly for me. There is actually no restriction on how much we can grant for a private sector housing grant. It can be anywhere from about £3,000, sometimes less, depending on what it is, all the way, as I say, there's no restrictions, but generally I don't think we've ever gone above about 30,000.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other colleagues got questions? No comments? No. Okay, move on to Schedule 3, which is the arrears update housing revenue account. Any questions on this schedule? No. Oh, Councillor Braze.
Yes, thanks. Yes, it seems to be a very small increase in arrears, which is I'm quite relieved to see, given the circumstances. But I just wondered how that small increase compares with other local authorities in Scotland, if that information is available.
Mr. Morrow, do you have that information at hand?
I can give a kind of a broad brush answer, if you like. I mean, I think, as I say, Councillor, it's reassuring that the level of arrears is broadly the same as it was at the end of March 2020. That's not to say that we don't want the arrears to go down, which we obviously do. But I think in terms of how that sits alongside other providers across Scotland, we're broadly in the middle. Rent arrears being stable is the average position. Clearly, there's some who have been slightly better performance, but equally there are a lot of others where the rent arrears has got a lot worse. So So in terms of our overall position, as I say, we're kind of sitting in the middle. So the good news is that we've stabilised the rent arrears. The bad news, obviously, is that people still are finding it difficult to manage their household incomes, and that's something that we're concerned about, and continue to work with them to try and address the financial position that they find themselves in. The reassuring thing, I suppose, is that despite the pandemic getting greatly worse, as I say, the people who are most affected, been through the pandemic, have tended to be working age single individual, perhaps with those with less established tenancies, and some families as well. We also know that many working households have been struggling a bit with debt and arrears, and some of them perhaps haven't sought the support that there is available through the sort of various public programs that we've had through the pandemic. But obviously we're still continuing to engage as much as we can with those people to manage the situation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duff, I think you're next. I think you're on mute, Councillor Duff.
Right, so thanks, convener. Yeah, sorry, it's probably a follow-up question for Mr. Morrow on page 23. I mean, I note what he's saying, and if you actually look at the number of arrears, which is what I looked at on that table, there's what, almost tenants in arrears. Now that on the face of it looks quite an alarmingly high percentage of our tenants, but I'm conscious that some of them, I mean, are we just looking at maybe a week or two in arrears, and that may be slightly skewing that figure? Because on face value, that looks like quite a big number. I just wonder what sort of the background is on that.
Mr. Morrow.
Yeah, Councillor, it is a snapshot in time, and as you say, the way that the figures are collated, there's always a time lag. So it depends on from week to week how many tenants are picked up in that statistic. But one of the aspects, I think, in terms of the number, it is a large number of individuals, but actually the number of individuals has tended to reduce over the periods. But certainly in the last year, the level of arrears for some cases has increased. So perhaps fewer tenants in arrears, but the arrears level that they have is increased, and that wouldn't be unexpected because of the pandemic. And clearly, some of those arrears were already in place before the pandemic came along, but others have accrued just during the last year or so. So it's a mixed picture, I suppose. But as you say, it is a snapshot in time, and it does change from month to month.
Could I maybe just have a supplementary? So that could in fact be one tenant could be in arrears maybe 3 times in the year, and that would count as 3 cases. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that perhaps in that context, it's maybe not as alarming a number as it might at first sight be. But thanks for that. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Devine, please.
Thanks, convener. I was just wondering, is it the housing officers who speak with the tenants, or do they refer them on to somebody else, to somebody in housing or into welfare rights, or perhaps both, actually?
Mr. Morrow.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, Councillor, your last point there, it is a combination of both. We have a rent arrears team within the Revenues and Benefits Service who pick up the initial engagement with tenants, but clearly our housing officers in the front line, as part of their duties, are always communicating with our tenants and firstly trying to prevent any arrears occurring, and then when arrears do occur, our housing officers work with the rent arrears team in Revs and Bens to try and put arrangements in place for people to pay back any arrears that they're experiencing. So it's a combination. We also work very closely with the welfare rights team, and clearly wherever we can, we refer people to welfare rights to try and maximise the income potential they have from any benefits entitlement that they have. So it is a combination of all those things. And I think for the most part, although as Councillor, a large number, for the most part, the majority are quite keen to work with us to try and get arrangements in place to pay the arrears back. It is a slow process, obviously, but I think we try to look on things positively. And sympathetically and sensitively to work with people as best we can, because the alternative, I suppose, is a much more aggressive approach, which is not our approach at the moment, certainly. And in that way, the end result of that, I suppose, is the action of going towards eviction. But that's only in the extreme cases, and clearly, as I say, most people are keen to work with us to achieve some positive outcomes. But it is a combination of officers from different services, and I think we work quite well together.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Proctor.
Yeah, just to follow on for that, Mr. Morrow, and I think I maybe asked this question in previous meetings. When does this sort of alarm bell ring? When's the sort of trigger to get your debt team and your welfare people in? I mean, is it a period of a month or greater or less? Because again, I often see this from the other side, looking to help people. They've actually, not Angus, I may say, but other local authorities, they seem to have been able to accrue quite large sums of rent arrears. How long is it before we actually sort of get the team in to do the business?
Mr. Morrow, please.
Thanks, Councillor. I think it depends on the individual circumstances. It's very difficult to put a time period on it, as you suggest, and also quite difficult to put a financial threshold, because it does depend on the particular circumstances of the household in question. And actually, obviously, the best way is to try and recognise the signs of financial difficulty before they arise, and to try and prevent arrears accruing. And that's one of the ways that our housing officers try to approach their work, is to get to a good relationship with the tenants and understand their particular position, and that can often signal the signs of financial difficulty. And at that point, we can ask our welfare rights colleagues to get involved as well. So you could say that we're trying to get in before anything happens. In terms of once arrears do occur, it depends on the financial position, financial details of the household, but also their household makeup. So it's not a one size fits all. It's about being empathetic towards their position and trying to make arrangements that suit the household, with the outcome that we want to achieve, obviously, is full payment of any arrears over a period of time. And again, that period of time can vary depending on the circumstances of the household.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Any other colleagues have a question? Councillor Cheap.
Yeah, thanks, Kenny. Just for Mr. Morrow on this one, just for clarity, following on what Councillor Proctor's just said, if we have circumstances for a number of people where they leave our properties without paying the balances that are outstanding, or even if we go down routes where we try all we can to recover debt, am I right in assuming that we wouldn't rehouse these people again because they still owe funds to Angus Council?
Chair, if I can come back in, if that's okay.
Yes, you can, please.
Yeah, you're quite right, Councillor, that if people leave with arrears still outstanding, that moves into our, as you'll see in the report, the former tenant arrears. So tenants who were formerly with us and still have arrears outstanding. We pursue that as much as we can, firstly, but there is a point at which we find that it's hard to recoup that, and we'll write it off. That doesn't mean to say, though, that it may be written off, but if those same tenants try to get a tenancy with us in the future, that outstanding debt is taken into consideration, and we ask them to make arrangements to pay that arrears off as part of any offer of housing.
So they could get housing and still have the debt outstanding?
In some circumstances, our first response is that there is debt outstanding. You have to pay that off before you get a home. But clearly, there are some cases where there are particularly vulnerable people that we have to make exceptions. But generally, our approach is to have the debt removed before we'll make an offer of housing again.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I think Councillor Stewart's next, and then Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, it was just to follow on from Councillor Cheap's question there. Mr. Morrow, can you just clarify if there is debt present and they present themselves homeless, are they still eligible for a house? Because I think we have a duty to do that, do we?
Yeah, we certainly have a duty to provide temporary accommodation if they present as homeless, and then as part of the assessment of their position, the debt would then be taken into account. But certainly in the first instance, we have a duty to house anybody that presents as homeless.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Convener. Mr. Morrow, am I not correct in thinking that as a last resort, you can attach to their earnings, including if they're on benefits, to say have to pay off £1 a week or whatever?
Mr. Morrow.
Yes, we certainly try to make arrangements in place that mean that money will be recouped, but it's also affordable. So an assessment is done to try and identify what is an affordable amount that can be repaid. If that answers your question.
Yeah, we can go down the line of actually going through the court to get this amount per week, can we not? And if we can, do we?
There are some circumstances where wages can be arrested, and we have done that. But most of these things depend on the circumstances, and obviously going through a court depends on the court's opinion about the particular case.
Yeah, and can I just ask one other question? I mean, the value bandings are shown, but not the length of the debt. So we could have somebody who owes us £1,500 and has owed us it for 40 weeks. And it doesn't show within this. We don't know what the average debt per week is effectively. Is there any way of showing that so that we can see whether our weekly situation is improving or not?
We could certainly look at the way that the figures are reported in terms of, as I say, that how long people are in debt for, if that's what you're asking in terms of an average, I suppose. Something we could look at if that's information that you would find useful.
Yeah, I'm looking at how we can look at who needs the help, as well as, how much they owe us.
Well, in terms of who needs the help and how much, I suppose that at an individual level, that's the work that our officers and certainly our rent arrears team in revenues and benefits, that is carried out at that individual level. The reporting mechanism here, I suppose, is more about giving an overall picture, but there may be a balance in the format that we could achieve. Perhaps that's something we could explore, putting some options before you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cheap.
So is that me, Councillor Sam, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Just a very quick point to come back on, just because picking up from what Councillor Moore said there. I know I'm very much aware through my work of Angus attaching earnings for council tax arrears. I don't see any reason, why it would be any different for rent arrears. So can you just clarify that, Mr. Morrow? Because I think, there can't be any sense of one if we won't do it for the other as well.
Okay, Mr. Morrow.
Yeah, one of the reasons we have the rent arrears team in revenues and benefits is that we have a consistent approach. So as I say, we can do that in circumstances, and it's very much aligned to the way that council tax is recouped.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else got any questions? No comments? No. Okay. Oh, I see a hand going up, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, having looked at these figures, I think we just have to say to the housing team, well done, because it seems to have been very well managed, considering the last year we've just had. And it's very positive to see that the former tenants' arrears are dropping as well.
Okay, thank you. I think Mr. Morrow will pass that along to the team. Thank you. Okay, move on to Schedule 4, which is the extension to the Fleet Partnership Agreement with Tayside Contracts. Any questions on this schedule? Councillor Proctor? You're on mute.
Yeah, just a quick question. on page 33, table 5, financial implications, there's a wee table there. It delegates the service area. We've got waste, parks and other. And although the figures have actually come down quite a bit, what does other, what does it entail? What's the sort of makeup of other?
Okay, I think it'll be Mr. Daly that's going to answer that. Hopefully it's his name at the bottom of the report. So,
yes, Chair, I could answer that. It's as you can see, it's the minority of the spend is on the other, but that consists, to give you some examples, you have education, you have minibuses, you have some of the, the vehicle and social work, some small vans, I think Meals on Wheels type vans. So it's basically the other departments out with waste and parks, but because waste in particular and then parks are the biggest spenders because of the nature of their fleet, they're shown separately. But it's basically all other departments of the council, and that's just a couple of examples of the other types of vehicles we have.
okay, thank you. Brilliant. Councillor Devine.
Thanks, convener. Now, I know that electric and hydrogen vehicles are very expensive, especially the larger ones, but I was just hoping to hear that we are looking at that for the future and not in the too distant future, I hope. I know that Dundee has got some waste vehicles already, and I'm just wondering when we might be able to do something like that.
Okay, thank you. That's something I'm very supportive of, and Mr. Daly and I have regular discussions on this, but I'll let Mr. Daly expand on that.
Yes, it's an area where we're very aware of, and we will need to transition in coming years. As you've said, the capital cost, the one-off cost of the alternate fuels such as hydrogen or electric is massively different, and where other councils have bought these, for example, Dundee, has been subsidised, that has allowed them to purchase the vehicles. We are in discussion with national projects, national groups, in terms of how we could participate in any demonstration projects. I would say that we are putting infrastructure in place to an extent. We've got some electric charging points now at our depots. Some of maybe the easier to do, and for example, our supervisors in waste and parks now drive electric vehicles. So we're watching the space closely, and we're definitely keen to participate and look at what the opportunities are for us to do demonstration projects or similar.
Thanks, Mr. Daly. I'm sure I was pretty sure that you would be looking at that for the future.
Okay, Councillor Braze.
Yes, thanks. Just for a wee bit of clarity, 2.1 on page 32, we're told in the third paragraph, through the partnership, Tayside Contracts provides various fleet-related services, including vehicle repair, vehicle plant tyre, vehicle disposal, etc. And then in the final paragraph, we're told Tayside Contracts also carry out procurement of new vehicles. And I was just checking to make sure that this is actually done through the partnership as well, because it's not, there's no mention of procurement in the third paragraph.
Mr. Daly, do you want to cover that off, please?
Yeah, just to confirm, the way it works is that we're responsible for our procurement strategy, the specification of the vehicles, and ultimately we retain ownership. But Tayside Contracts officers, they carry out the process in terms of the tendering and the evaluation of the tenders, putting the tenders out, notification, so the actual procurement process is carried out by Tayside Contracts officers who have the technical expertise in terms of evaluation of the bidders and so on. So that's the way it works in practice.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Muir.
Thank you, convener. I'm not sure that I shouldn't declare an interest as being a member of the Tayside Contracts Joint Committee, though this is something that is not within the remit that we take. Just one question, it's going off on a tangent at this. Would Tayside Contracts be able to do the taxi inspections?
Don't know if that's a question that could be answered today, but if you want to have a go, Mr. Daly, on you
Well,
go.
I think that I was just going to say, Chair, that I think that this would be something that we need to put to Tayside Contracts. My understanding is that, you know, there's a capacity issue in terms of what they can do, but I think that question would be best put to Tayside Contracts.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else got questions? No, any comments? No. Okay, we'll move on to report number 5, which is the land at former Kinloch Primary School, Dundee Street, Carnoustie. This is another good news story for social housing in Angus. I'm sure my Carnoustie colleagues will want to say something. No, nobody want to say anything? Oh, there we go. Well, I think Councillor Moore was first. He's come up on my screen, so we'll go with Councillor Moore.
Yes, I have a question on this one. I mean, social housing is wonderful. It's what we're needing desperately. But it's approximately 3,360 square metres. And they're proposing 14 units, which is 240 square metres per property, including open space, community space, roads, pavements, etc. And development management expects a minimum of 400 square metres per property, whether it's affordable or not. And I'm just wondering why we are making such small units.
I think I'm going to let an officer answer this, but today we're really just determining whether we are moving this land onto the HRA. I believe the designs are not finalised, but I'll leave it to whichever officer would like to come in and address that question.
Hi, Convener, it's Gavin Balfour.
Gavin Balfour, on you go, Gavin.
Yeah, just on that, we're following all the planning guidance in terms of social housing. I think maybe that's the difference, is that it's social housing we're looking at here rather than private housing. But I see John has his hand up as well. He may be able to come in with a bit more.
Okay, Mr. Morrow.
Yeah, I was quickly taking my hand down there. As you said, Chair, I think the scheme we have at the moment, I guess at sketch viability stage, to give an idea of the number of units, you're quite right, Councillor, that the scheme at the moment is designed to be a combination of affordable housing on the site for mainstream social tenants, but also parking and also some amenity space. That is subject, obviously, to some discussions with our planning colleagues to get their view. But we're always, I think, aware that we have to get the balance right between the amount of housing on a site and the amount of amenity space, and particularly in the context of Carnoustie High Street, where we know that there's been interest from the residents of Carnoustie in terms of a space that can be used both for any particular residents, whether that be business or housing on the site, as well as residents themselves. And that's the way that we've approached the sketch viability scheme. It is very much subject to further discussion with planning and probably further discussion with local members as well. But I know that when we had our initial discussions, I think of the options we put forward, one particular option which delivers 14 units, as you so rightly say, was the one that stood out, and that's a mixture of single-storey cottages as well as two-storey flats, ground floor and first floor flats, to get a balance of aesthetic, if you like, that works well with the neighbouring properties in the supported housing and the care centre there. So that's what we have put forward in terms of a viability. But as I say, it is subject to further discussion with planning colleagues, and then obviously clearly stage down the road a planning submission when there'll be full consultation as well.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Councillor Moore? No.
No.
Brilliant. Okay, I think Councillor Cheap was next.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. This is just something just to to comment that I can't probably comment in support of this enough. This has been an ongoing thing for some years now in Carnoustie, looking for commercial clients, if you like, to take up the space, and some things came forward, some things fell back, but there has been huge community interest in this site, and to accommodate some form of community space. What Mr. Morrow has just mentioned was very welcome, in that from the council and housing and the 3 elected members were all able to get together, us representing. We knew the views of the people of Carnoustie, and the first drawings that we have seen, and there was one particular one that satisfied us all most, I think you would say, which delivers social housing, which Carnoustie desperately does need, but will still deliver the community space and the flexible option that we'll have. So it's great to say, so I would heartily recommend this to committee just to approve this and to move on. It's definitely a positive step for Carnoustie.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald?
I'll not waffle on because Councillor Cheap's pretty much said it all, but just to reassure Councillor Moore that what we've been presented with as local members is, in my opinion, absolutely brilliant. And I think it's something that the 3 local members have embraced, and it's something that we're really looking forward to seeing this progressing.
Thank you. I think it's also worth saying, I spoke to officers about this, that indications are there'll be 14 houses, 3 probably for families with particular needs, and there may possibly be up to 9, which will be barrier free. So I think that should be welcomed by all colleagues. And I'll now move to Councillor Proctor, who has a comment or a question.
Thank you very much. It's a comment, convener. I just think it's great to see this brownfield site being used, with what the people want. And you've got in Carnoustie, you've got the veterans accommodation, which I remember in the last administration, some members weren't too happy and it happening in Carnoustie, but it's a great success. And I think this here, right in the centre, I think it's absolutely fantastic, and well done, all those officers and members who've been involved in it. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else got anything? Any questions, comments? No. Is this report agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Go on to number 6, which is Port Marine Safety Code, Arbroath Harbour and Marine Safety Plan and Policies. I think he doesn't know I'm going to ask him to do this, but I think I'm going to ask Mr. Scott just to give a very brief overview on this, because we have to undertake a training course, all members, and he might just want to remind us all that he's trying to get one single date amongst all of us. Good luck to him to do this training course. So is Mr. Scott with us?
I am, convener. Yeah, I sensed you would ask me to present this, hence putting the camera on just before you did so.
Good.
Thank you, to convener. Thanks for members in this regard. Yeah, as convener's pointed out, there's a double edge to this particular sword in this report, in that it very much outlines our present and new vision and thinking in terms of safety, and how we do make sure that we've got the right plans in place down at Arbroath Harbour. It's vital in terms of that for our own liabilities, as well as the safe operation and the success of the harbour. And part of that change is, in that refresh, does involve extending our knowledge in terms of the responsibilities under the Marine Safety Plan. And that does require a half-day training session for the duty holder. And whether members were fully aware of it or not, I'm sure you were, the Communities Committee is the duty holder, and you as the members of that committee are duty holders, and therefore it is essential and it is mandatory in this sense that the duty holders, all 15 on the committee, attend a half day. I think it'll be a short half day, so probably a couple of hours at the very least, either in the morning or the afternoon, where we will have our expert come in, probably online in that regard, and do the training that's required. As the convener has mentioned, it is a challenge. I've put out emails to all 15 of you. I've received responses from more than half, So those of you who haven't responded, it's not too late. And one of my actions following on from this would be to send a reminder, an update, and maybe just pare down the available days from those who've already expressed which ones they're available for. As I say, I can't emphasise enough that this is very much just setting our stall out for a safe Arbroath Harbour. And whilst it is slightly different to the way we've done things in the past, it's certainly where we see the current requirements and where we see the future of Arbroath Harbour, and that does very much include the elected members as duty holders.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions on this report? Councillor Duff?
I'm not really sure if it's a question or a comment, convener, and I know what Mr. Scott's saying, but I've been on this committee and its predecessors for 9 years, and I don't recall ever taking a decision about Montrose Harbour in any form at all. That responsibility seems to have been devolved to the Montrose Harbour subcommittee. And we keep getting told by senior officers and indeed by the Standards Commission that elected members should not be involved in operational matters. And I would have thought the safe operation of the harbour, I would be expecting the harbour master and perhaps the senior council managers that he reports to be up to date with safety. But I just cannot see why elected members need to be. I mean, we run bin trucks. I'm not expected to know about the safe way of operating bin trucks or, recycling centres or, landfill sites, and they all come under this committee. So I cannot see the point of a half-day course, which I'm never going to use because I've never taken a decision in relation to Arbroath Harbour. All those decisions are taken by the subcommittee. I can just about see the logic of the subcommittee who are responsible for maintenance and upkeep of the harbour being involved, but the main committee, it kind of beggars belief for me. I mean, that's just a rant, and I know some members think this meeting's gone on for too long, but that's my personal feeling. And when I saw the email from Mr. Scott, I just deleted it because I assumed it was for the harbour subcommittee. So that's my apologies. If I have to do it, I'll do it, but it just seems to me very strange.
I'll bring Mr. Scott
Convener.
Before we bring Councillor Dunn.
I'm
sure there's a main reason we need to do it, Mr. Scott, and you'll explain it why.
Well, I'll give you the reason. I'll also address some of the points and the questions that were left open there by Councillor Duff. I direct Councillor Duff and the other members to the previous reports that are referenced in this report. In terms of the duty holders' responsibilities in Report 11414 and others, in which case they were approved by the Communities Committee. And therefore there have been decisions made by this committee and by the members of this committee as part of their duties as duty holder. I would also clarify that the subcommittee that was referred to by Councillor Duff is a consultative committee. It's the Arbroath Harbour Joint Consultative Committee. It is not a subcommittee. It is consulted upon with elected members with an interest and from Montrose as well as the harbour users. And as I say, it's very much consultative. The reports for that are presented for approval by the Communities Committee, and therefore the duty holders have had clear responsibilities as members of this committee, and this is really making that very apparent. In terms of the requirements to understand the operational responsibilities at the harbour, that is not what the duty holder is required to do. The duty holder is required to provide the strategic leadership and to commit the necessary strategic rigour and scrutiny to ensure that the harbour is operating safely in that respect. So there's no requirement for any of the elected members as duty holders in terms of how we operate the harbour. What you are required is to have a strategic knowledge on which you can base your decisions as members of the Communities Committee as the overall duty holder.
Okay, thank you. I think that's very clear. Councillor Durno?
I just want to say that I'm looking forward to the training because I constantly get fishermen and people with yachts emailing myself saying, have you seen this rope that's lying here? Have you seen these creels that are lying here? This is a safety issue. So if I am clued up on all the safety issues, then I will know if it's a safety issue or not. So I'm actually quite looking forward to it. Thank you.
There we go. There's a positive comment now. Mr. Scott. That's a start. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, convener. Yes, if we're doing Arbroath Harbour, does that mean that we're going to go on to Montrose Harbour and every other harbour that we've got in the Angus? And if not, why not?
Through you,
Mr.
convener.
Scott will explain why not. And you go, Mr. Scott.
Angus Council is the statutory harbour authority for Arbroath Harbour, which is set by the bylaws that apply to Arbroath Harbour. We are not the statutory harbour authority for any other harbour within Angus. Montrose, as Montrose Port Authority, it is a trust port and a statutory harbour authority, and therefore that trust is responsible for the management and for the safety of that particular port and their compliance with the Marine Safety Code.
Okay, there we go. Councillor Devine. Sorry, Councillor Braze was first. My apologies. Councillor Braze.
Yes, thanks very much, convener. I'm just wondering what happens in a situation where everyone in this committee can't be available for the half-day training at the same time. What would happen then? Would anyone who didn't have the training be able to recuse themselves from any meetings involving Arbroath Harbour and decisions thereon? I'm just very aware that some members of this committee are going to have to take a half day off their work. You know, and that they're already inundated with requests for briefings and meetings, etc. Thank you,
Mr. Scott.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, through you. In terms of this, we are seeking to establish a single date. That would be the preferable option, in which case all 15 members can attend at the same time and enjoy the same learning experience and also to share in that learning experience. It also means that the consultant that we employ will be employed once to do that training. We currently don't have a provision for additional dates, although clearly we could have the fallback of that, but there would be a financial impact on that with having to pay for that consultant to do the training on another occasion. If in terms of the 15, if there is, if not all are able to attend, the likely and the predicted and forecast result of that would be when the audit is undertaken, which will follow on in September and October. There will be identified within that audit the fact that not all of the duty holders had attended and sat the half-day training that was required, and therefore that will be identified within that audit. And in terms of the extreme of the risk in that regard, that does open the council up to certain liability if anything were to happen down at the harbour, accepting Councillor Duff's comment in terms of operationally, that is not the responsibility. But if there were to be any matters that were arising there, if it was deemed a material consideration was that the duty holders weren't trained as they were intended, that might have an impact on that. So the immediate side of that, Councillor Braze, would be that the audit would pick that up. The audit will be reported back to this as the parent committee, and it would be then for the committee to take a view on the risk that the council was taking in terms of not every one of the 15 members being able to attend that particular training session.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Devine.
Thanks, convener. I see that we've to undertake an operational tour of Arbroath Harbour at some point. Were you thinking this is going to happen quite soon? I just point out that we do have Brothick water flood prevention scheme on the 14th of September in the afternoon, so it might be that we could link them up together.
Through you, convener, thanks, Councillor Devine. That's a fine idea in terms of collaborating in that respect. So I'll certainly take that idea and credit it to you. And if there is that visit, that's maybe when we will seek to hold it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else got any questions? No, any comments? No. Can we agree the report, please? Agreed. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, so if we move on to item 7, which is the Angus Business Improvement Grant. Councillor MacDonald?
Yeah, very welcome to see something like this come forward, and it would be nice in the future if we can somehow expand on it. Just wanting to look at the grant criteria and see if officers can tell us a little bit more information, if they've got any, about how they plan to do the assessments and you know, what sort of format they'll be taking, especially when we're looking at the sort of different levels of grant.
Okay, is it, who's it, Mrs. Smith doing this?
Yes.
Or you are?
Yes, I'm going to do this.
And you got?
Apologies, I'm a bit hoarse today, so I'll try my best and hopefully you can hear me. Yes, so we've set out the criteria there, and we'll be working up an application that obviously picks up that criteria, and an assessment to back that up. So we'll be using, you know, whatever the established criteria is, we'll be using one of various formats that we have experience of in terms of application and assessment. But looking at that proportionately, you know, from the smaller grants, so that's slightly, you know, lighter touch around some of that. And the idea being with the bigger grants, we will introduce something different, which is around the panel and a bidding, sort of Dragon's Den type approach, a pitch. And we will be having a panel and we'll be assessing applications and then hearing those pitches and making a decision. So once we have hopefully have approval today for the principles of the grant, we'll be working up that assessment, application assessment criteria and finalising that, and we'll be able to share that hopefully very soon, just so that it clearly sets that out. But we'll be going working on sort of experience of other formats that we've used in the past or other grants that we're aware of.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say, Mrs. Smith, number 3 outlines that the council leader and the leader of the SNP group will work with officers to finalise the scheme criteria and conditions.
Yes.
And assessment method. So that's the final process of this.
That would be the final stage, yes.
Yeah.
This is to hopefully get the approval today to work this up into more detail.
Thank you. Councillor Duff?
Yeah, thanks, convener. It's really just a comment. I'm not sure I completely agree with my colleague, Councillor MacDonald. I mean, it is welcome, but I have to say I'm somewhat underwhelmed by the amount of money, 250,000 out of the 5.6 million that was available. Now, I know there's other things that the COVID money is to be used for, but it's 5% and 37 grants. If you spread that across Angus, is pretty thin. I mean, if you walk through most of the high streets in Angus, I mean, I've been in Kirriemuir recently, and Montrose, there's an awful lot of empty and closed businesses. So it's welcome, but you know, I wouldn't say I'll be jumping over the rainbow about £250,000. It seems like a very small sum of money.
Thank you. I think we've got to start someplace, Councillor Duff, and I'm sure 250,000 will be welcomed by many businesses throughout Angus who are successful. Councillor Devine?
Yeah, well, just to follow up there, I think we're maybe missing a trick here, because we really do need to be engaging with businesses on climate change. And this is a brilliant opportunity, but again, 250,000 isn't going to go that far. And as it is a climate emergency that we have, I really think that we should be looking at really putting more into this pot, particularly to do with reducing waste, improving energy efficiency, and everything else to do with climate emergency. We can save the companies money at the same time as you know, decreasing carbon emissions.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else got any questions? Comments? Mrs. Smith, do you want to come back?
Yes, thank you. If I could just perhaps to add to that. So as part of the grant, what we want to do is, you know, engage with businesses in sort of more rounded ways. It's not solely about the grant and processing of that. And certainly we would be signposting them to any other available sources of funding, particularly you know, from Zero Waste Scotland, for example, and working with Scottish Enterprise, who have refocused their grants around green jobs and the circular economy. So that would be part of that assessment. We wouldn't be looking to fund things through this that could be funded from other sources, just to try and maximise those opportunities. But trying to get a sense of the types of grants that come through would also help us with any future proposals or thoughts around where we should be directing funds as we see what kind of projects come forward from businesses.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a helpful explanation. Anybody else? 3, 1 to 4. Agreed?
Agreed.
Good. Didn't hear anybody. Thank you. So if we move on to item 8, another good news story, B961 Kilkenny, amendments to existing speed limits. Any questions on this, first of all? No questions? Any comments? Councillor Fotheringham.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I'm delighted to see this recommendation coming forward in this report. In the terms of the last council, I was contacted by several residents of that road, and at that point, Mr. Hudson and his team, I met with them, and the existing speed limit, the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit that's existing now, was implemented and installed at that time. Since then, I have raised further concerns with Mr. Hudson, who's been absolutely first class, I have to say, as he always is, and he met with the traffic coordination group, which includes our police colleagues, and I'm delighted to see now that they're going to put in these 2 40-mile-per-hour buffer zones, because although there hasn't been any serious accidents in the last, when they put in the original 30 miles an hour, where a car went right through the wall of a lady's garden, and I think it catapulted, if I'm right in thinking, a fence post right through her bedroom window while she was sleeping. So hopefully that will make a difference to the safety of the residents of that road and the road users themselves. So I'm happy to support the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? No. Well, we'll just move to agree the recommendations. Are the recommendations agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you, and thanks very much. That's the end of the meeting.
Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. See you later.